Welcome to Derp Shield, Journey into the Unknown, Part 2, Rescuing Jebediah. In the last episode, we left Jebediah in a little bit of a pickle. Fuel actually wasn't the concern for Jebediah. It was actually his electrical charge. Without it, he couldn't keep his capsule pointed the correct way during reentry. Not wishing to abandon Jebediah and the science in a elliptical orbit, I decided to mount a rescue mission. This is where Bill Kerman steps up to the plate. The same rocket which took Jebediah to the moon shall also be rescuing him, although it is a slightly different version because there's a second capsule slapped on top. This second command module sure didn't help with the lean to the left. It still wanted to do it during the solid booster phase. With the power of gimbaling, the craft rights itself and it points towards the stars and Jebediah. At this point, Bill gets concerned about his friend. There's no docking technology, he thinks. Why don't we have this yet? Poor Jebediah is going to have to make a little traverse through the depths of space with naught but his spacesuit. Because this vessel was made for a mud encounter, Bill decides that there's plenty of fuel, and thus stomps on the accelerator to get to Jebediah within a single orbit. Even though Bill isn't the most courageous of Kerbals, he still wants to rescue his friend, and thus prepares to get into a stable orbit. Following in Jebediah's footsteps, Bill proves to the world that he is also an advanced Kerbonaut, obtaining a stable orbit with relative ease. Once Bill has obtained a stable orbit, he notices that he's not in the correct plane to match up with Jebediah. While performing this rendezvous, I remember a time not so long ago when I couldn't even perform this relatively simple procedure. The reason I wanted to perform this procedure is because during one of my first launches, I ran out of fuel and had Jebediah or some other Kerbal in a highly elliptical orbit around Kerbin. Not wishing to strand this poor Kerbonaut in his highly elliptical orbit, I set out to learn rendezvous or docking in order to save him. After attempting the docking tutorial and the rendezvous tutorial, I figure, hey, I can probably do this in the sandbox mode. Turns out I had not a clue of what I was doing. I went through the general launch procedures and then proceeded to rendezvous with the craft. In the end, I ran out of fuel and had two crafts that were on almost an escape trajectory from Kerbin because I didn't know how to perform an orbital rendezvous. It was at this point that I decided to look up some tutorials and discovered Scott Manley's videos. After watching his orbital rendezvous, docking, and other various tutorials multiple times, I decided that I had more of an idea of the mechanics behind this. With this newfound knowledge, I decided that I should try to rescue one of these Kerbals and do it correctly this time. In the end, I still couldn't figure out how to do a rendezvous. I installed MechJeb and let it perform the rendezvous for me. After watching MechJeb perform the rendezvous, I realized there was one key part that I was not getting. I was still in orbital mode, not target mode on the Navball. Even with the help of MechJeb, I never actually rescued those poor Kerbals. They're still probably floating around Kerbin in a different save file. Thinking back on that experience and watching myself perform a rendezvous in this post-commentary has made me realize that I have become a lot better at the Kerbal Space Program. Using the Navball instead of maneuver nodes, I kill all lateral velocity when compared to the target, and then I burn towards the target in order to get a close encounter for the future. Using the Navball, I believe, is far simpler once you have achieved a relatively similar orbit to gain a rendezvous encounter with your target. You simply burn retrograde as parallel to the target until you've killed all velocity in comparison with the target, and then you burn towards the target, and you should get a relatively close encounter within a few of these burns. Just remember when you have this close encounter that you remember to kill the lateral velocity with respect to your target once you get within the close encounter. Although we are extremely close and using the main engine at this point is not advisable, I have to because I do not have RCS systems unlocked. This isn't saying that you can't use main engines for these rendezvous procedures once you get really close. In fact, you can even use the main engine to perform a docking. You just have to be extremely precise when performing such procedures. While I could do a spacewalk from this point, I did not want to risk Jebediah running out of EVA propellant or potentially getting lost due to my ineptitude in the depths of space. With this in mind, I decide to get even closer to the currently stranded craft. Now it is time for me to attempt something that I have never done before, doing a spacewalk between two crafts that are not within 100 meters of each other. Upon leaving the capsule, I grab all the science data that's stored within it. These spacesuits sure have a lot of pockets because that is a lot of science he's carrying around. After performing a last-minute search for any additional science that I may have missed, I prepare to leave on this spacewalk. With only a mere 500 meters separating me and safety, I set off for the rescue ship. The lack of any real UI when you're in the EVA mode is very disconcerting to me at first when crossing such a vast distance. With no Navball or instruments to help guide my trajectory, I eyeball my way towards the next ship. After time warping slightly too hard, I have to go back towards the craft, having passed it. At this point, I was very anxious that I may have used up too much EVA propellant during the course of this mission and might not have enough to get onto the ship. Luckily for me, I didn't use much EVA propellant during the course of this mission, or it in fact refills every time you enter the command module. With the difficult part of this mission now complete, it only remains to land safely back on Kerbin and pray that the vessel can hold up under the rigors of deadly reentry. Upon entering the atmosphere, everything seems to be going fine. Then suddenly, the landing legs explode. I thought it was all over because I thought my rocket was disintegrating, but it turns out only the landing legs were destroyed during the course of this reentry. And we have touchdown. Bill Kerman has successfully rescued Jebediah and the science generated during his MUN mission. Performing what experiments they can after this landing, Jebediah and Kerman are hailed as heroes to the Kerbal people. In the end, this mission was a wild success, gaining 521 science, a new record for this space program. Reaping the rewards from the last mission, I have gained access to new parts. Thank you for watching the second episode of Journey into the Unknown. I hope you enjoyed it. The next episode shall be posted sometime in the beginning of January when I get back from winter break. 121 science.